Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Darren, a first year medical student studying at Monash University. So for today, as you can see, we're doing something slightly different. I like giving and receiving concrete, very solid advice, very practical advice that I can work on instead of generic tips. So for today, I thought I'd give this a try, which is I'll be going through one of my English essays and talking about what I was thinking and some notable things that I tried to work on to make my English essays well crafted. In terms of English, I scored a 50 in the subject, and I got full marks for the comparative and text response sections of the end of year exam. And so the essay we'll be looking at right now is a text response essay that I wrote in preparation for the SAC, which is a little bit different because it's Scotch. The SAC is significantly longer than the exam. But yeah, this piece is really long anyway. We'll just be going through it and talking about some interesting things about it. So enjoy. Okay, cool. So if we the topic of this essay is the Women of Troy challenges our understanding of cowardice and bravery. So that was my play that I studied. If you guys are studying the same play, then yeah, it's very fortunate. But if you're not, I think there are some takeaways that you can still get from here in terms of structure and what I tried to work on. So cowardice and bravery are the keywords here. Sometimes I like to have my write out my 3 BPs. I think this topic was a bit hard for me to think of 3 BPs, which was why I did write them out, especially this third one. And so I had to write them out so that I could write my essay better. In terms of the quality of this essay overall, I think it's very good. It's one of the best essays I wrote before the SAC. The only problem with this, I'd say, is my third paragraph. The idea is a bit weird. It's not as clear cut as it could be, and I think the topic was a little bit hard, which is why it isn't as clear cut. But anyway, we'll go straight into the essay then. So with intros, I like to begin with a sort of descriptive image in the beginning, if I can think of one. So for example, here I have Hecuba, who was the queen of the Trojans. I describe her as frail, and she is the one that actually calls the Greeks the cowards. And so the Greeks are the ones that are winning, that are really patrolling and parading around, and she calls them cowards, which is quite weird. And the whole idea of this is that I'm trying to set this idea that Euripides, who is the playwright, is challenging what bravery and cowardice means. So I like to start with something descriptive because it appeals to the reader. It's quite interesting. It's almost like a sizzling start that you'd have in the past when you wrote stories. It's quite interesting. But the only thing I note is to have it, make sure it is related to the topic. So if you can't think of one, think of a moment in the play that you can describe that is related to the topic, then don't use it. Okay, so moving on, with my sort of signposting, I kept it really clear cut, just basically one sentence for each of my body paragraphs. I think that's really clear and that's sufficient. So here I have from the first episode, he suggests alternative forms of bravery. In the second BP, I'll be talking about how he has how he demonstrates flaws within the Greek victors. So not only does he have alternative bravery, but he suggests that just conquering people is not actually that brave. And then finally, and this is where my essay gets a bit weird, is that I say that Euripides is sort of putting forward the point that bravery and cowardice are quite you can't. He doesn't try to define them because he thinks it's really hard to, and some of the ambiguity he places into his characters reflects this. So as you can see, weird point. And in the last sentence, you can sort of have the author's overall contention, because a lot of the times the topics will be key themes in the play, and so the author usually or playwright has a contention and a message they want to pass on, and you can have that as the last part of your intro, just to see that you are engaging with what the author and the overall purpose of this piece. Okay, so moving on into the first paragraph, my first topic sentence just highlights my idea in a straightforward way. So I keep it not too long. I don't really like explaining a lot of things in my topic sentence. That's to come later. So I just say, from the beginning, he calls into question what bravery traditionally means. And the way he does this is through depicting the Trojans who have been defeated as quite inspirational. And then in my each BP, I talk about 2 moments. Now, the meaning of moments differs a little bit. So in this one, since I'm challenging the traditional perception of bravery, I'm presenting two people who you'd expect not to be brave, but are actually brave. So I have Hecuba, which is about from here to here, and then I have Cassandra, who is raped by a soldier called Ajax, to about here. So those are my two moments, and the reason why moments isn't like the best way to describe it is because I sort of focus on Hecuba being brave, but there are very varying moments in this. So for example, I have the opening play where she's lying quite still, but she's still, so she's lying quite still, but she still urges herself to uplift, which is quite brave. But I also have a bit later where she talks about my women, my girls, to the other Trojan women, which shows she still maintains leadership even in these times. So it's not precisely one moment, but rather one theme of this lady being brave, and I just find moments in the play that demonstrate this. In terms of the specific analysis, I like to have it sort of consequentially, like whatever order it happens in the play, I just describe it. So this lift heave part happens before the my women, my girls parts. And another thing that quite helps you write better is to use adjectives which help your point. So for example, here, bleak song. In bleak song, I'm trying to show that it is, it's sad. I'm showing that the atmosphere is really despondent, everyone's really sad, it's really depressing, and trying to set the scene in that way. So I describe the tunes of the bleak song as woeful, and that adds to the atmosphere, contributes to my point in emphasizing how utterly lacking in energy this environment is. So adding adjectives like that, sort of irrevocable, battered spirit, these things all help me set the scene, and I think they're very useful to use. Alright, and in terms of how you would arrange your two moments within the paragraph, I like to have a sentence within to highlight like a transition. So I don't want to just have two moments which sort of do the same thing. So because that doesn't really show a progression of argument within my paragraph. And so I have a linking sentence into Cassandra, which is sort of here. Let me, should I use a different color? No, I just use this. Alright. So here, an additional moment where Euripides presents an atypical character of courage is in Cassandra. And that's just me signifying that we're moving from an analysis of one character into another. And I also highlighted a difference. So while they're both victims who display courage, a big difference is that Cassandra's reverberations ring with a greater defiance. My English teacher helped me come up with that kind of metaphorical phrase. And so what I'm saying here is, even though their bravery is similar in its concepts, Cassandra's one might be seen as greater because she wants to more actively do something. So she wants to avenge her murdered dead brother, and she was probably desecrated more severely as well. Yep, in terms of analysis, I would suggest using a wide range of analyses. So, for example, here I have this pun, which I actually thought up in class. I was pretty proud of it. So, raised and raised. So, once it was, they're very opposing meanings. One's lift up, one's utterly destroyed. So, you can analyze words. For example, lift, heave, you can use sort of connotations of lift, heave as well. And what next? I had another metaphor. Yeah, this is sort of a metaphor here. So where Cassandra says she's going to sort of destroy Agamemnon's household, is I like in comparison. So the soldier is Cassandra, the weapon is her marriage, and that's sort of a metaphorical link there, which highlights the point of Euripides saying that this girl who's been raped, who has lost her entire homeland, can be actually seen as a kind of courageous soldier as well. And so the main point here to take away is that have different ranges of analyses in your piece. Don't just analyze words, but have a mix of techniques that you're looking at and that support your point. Alright, so moving on we have the the last part of the paragraph, and I like to draw out to the author's contention. So what was Euripides really trying to do through Hecuba and Cassandra? What he's trying to do is trying to provide an iconoclastic depiction of courage. Iconoclastic means contrasting against what was normal at the time, and yeah, so that was his main point. I think it's good to, and later in the year I progressed into doing this sort of drawing out in my in the middle of the paragraph as well, so where I shift from one moment to another, because that's a really big part of English, sort of seeing what the author's contention is, what he or she or they really wanted to impress onto onto the audience, whether that be the audience that they had at the time or even future audiences as well. And just another thing to note is that the reason this is really long, this is one of the main points I like to make with writing, is that because for the SAC you don't get to write that many essays. You've just sort of gone through the play, the movie, whatever. You can probably write 4 or 5 before. So for each of them, I just put in all my effort. I really draw out, really analyze, be really specific. And so then the feedback I get is really good. I don't think there's a point in really constraining yourself word count wise, because this is the time to explore and push the boundaries so that when you get into time conditions, it's easier for you to cut down. And you've also can analyze more in this scenario, so you've covered more of the play as well. Alright, so we'll move on to the second paragraph then. Once again, the topic sentence is quite straightforward. And another thing you'll notice is that even though like some words I use a bit like complex, they're words that my teacher have used or I've used, and they're words that mean what they say. Some people put in words and they kind of mean what they're trying to say, but not really. Maybe the word they're trying to say is a simpler word, which is why they avoid it. But for me, when I use big words, I try and make sure that big word fits exactly where it needs to be, and it means exactly what I want it to mean in that place. And also my phrasing, I try and keep it very clear. I hope you guys can understand even some of the long sentences. I'm a big believer in having simple language, simple sentence structures, but complex ideas. So I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to express complex ideas, to analyze really deeply in simple language and in a way that people can understand without having to scratch their head. Alright, so moving on. Through a scathing criticism, so here I'm saying Euripides is looking at the Greeks, and he's saying that they're actually cowardly, even though in history, the Greeks are the ones who beat the Trojans, and wow, they're so amazing and all that. So here we have a technique like ellipses, once again showing a variation in technique, and I'm saying here that ellipses is reflecting his reluctance to break news. What's next? And another thing with adjectives, right? So here I have morally indecisive, euphemistic. You see how these adjectives mean like different things? Some people, and I am guilty of this in the past, use adjectives that mean the same thing, but it's just because they think of that word a lot. So for example, for Agamemnon, he's a very immoral guy, so they might say like immoral, licentious, despicable person. You really just need one of those adjectives. You really don't need a whole lot. You can save that for later in the paragraph, and also it just doesn't really help the point. It makes it sound more convoluted and more and doesn't contribute to your idea, because you're trying to paint him as immoral, and you can do that in one word. Whereas here I'm trying to say that Tathibius, who is the messenger, is indecisive and euphemistic, which are two different things. Euphemistic describes the way he talks, his language, and indecisive describes him as a person. So that's just something to be aware of. Don't go overboard with the vocab. Okay, and with the two moments, let's have a look. Okay, I think this one I actually studied tathibius mainly, but I used a lot of moments with tathibius. So this is one little problem with this essay here, is that I used one person for this entire paragraph here. The moments are good because he appears quite a lot and at key moments of the play, and you see I have multiple moments. So here is where he lies to Hecuba, lies to Hecuba, where he says Polyxena, who's actually been killed, will serve someone at their tomb, which doesn't mean much when you think about it. And here I have him cleaning a dead kid's body, which is showing that he's quite empathetic. And here we have him sort of almost having an outburst at the actions of his leaders. So he's saying that they're not the wait, no. Oh, okay, never mind. I did have two moments here, my bad. So the two moments here, firstly, are tathibius, which is up to about here. Let me rub this out. So tathibius is from here to here. And then I have odysseus from here to here. So with tathibius and odysseus, I'm trying to convey two different points again, which still support the overarching point of the Greeks as not being like overly commendable. So the first point with tathibius is that he's a winner, right? He's won the war, he's done all that, but he's not like what we think of when we think of a victor, because he's euphemistic, he lies to people, and like actually what we like about him is that he cleans this dead boy's body, and yeah, that's what we like about him because of how empathetic he is, and that's not really a quality that can be seen in the rest of the Greeks. And also washing someone's body is also a very like female role back then, and so once again it contradicts this hyper masculine idea of courage. And in the second part, once again I acknowledge a change. So I've done with tathibius, I've moved on to here. So Euripides makes a more direct attack on cowardice in his portrayal of Odysseus. So I think with tathibius it was more subtle. He's more, how do I say it? Yeah, it's just a more subtle challenging. Like he doesn't look at someone brave and say you're not brave. Rather he's saying, oh look, this guy's pretty brave as well, even though his bravery is different to what we think of. But with Odysseus, everyone thinks he's smart. He ended the Trojan War with the idea of the horse, but Euripides just tears all that down and just describes him as a black-hearted politician, and how he made an entire speech for an entire council just to kill a little kid, which is very scary. And yeah, so that's him tearing down Odysseus. And so a lot of these quotes are used later on as well. So a lot of these good black-hearted politician, anytime I use Odysseus, usually he's either linked with killing this kid or linked with what other people call him. So other people call him a black-hearted politician. Carry the council is him wanting to kill the kid. These are moments associated with Odysseus, and most times when I mention him in an essay, those are the moments I will be using. So that plays into my point of like when you write essays, some moments will stick to you and you'll use them quite a bit in the future. And finally, I go out back to Euripides. Once again, I could do this a bit more in the middle of my paragraph as well. And so Euripides' overall idea, he's positing that kindness is commendable, so not just savagely beating down an entire city is cool, but kindness is what is really admirable. And also he suggests that cowardice exists within victors, because all we hear about Odysseus is the horse, but he kills his kid, and because of how scared he is that the kid will one day take revenge, and that idea just makes him seem cowardly. Alright, so the third paragraph, I'll move through this a bit quicker. This isn't the best paragraph. Like, I like the idea of it, how it's saying that cowardice and bravery are too hard to be defined, and so Euripides doesn't do that. Instead, he just shows it's ambiguous through mainly Helen. Yeah, so this whole paragraph was oh no, this first part was Helen. And this second part was Hecuba. And once again, we have this change, a subtle example of ambiguity. It's just showing a difference between the two moments that I've picked. And so with the paragraph, the idea, it's, yeah, I already mentioned the idea. So I talk about Helen as my first moment and her getting angry at Menelaus. There's not much to say here, especially if you don't do the play. But another thing to note is that each paragraph, it's important to structure your paragraphs a certain way as well. So the ideas of your paragraph. So the topic is that it challenges our understanding of cowardice and bravery. So first paragraph, I say challenges bravery. Second paragraph, I say sort of challenges, or first paragraph, alternative bravery. Second paragraph, saying that cowardice and bravery, challenging both cowardice and bravery. And third paragraph, saying that cowardice and bravery can't really be defined and shouldn't really be defined because of these reasons. And it'd be weird if I put this this moment first, because usually you begin with a quite straightforward discussion of, okay, yes, he does challenge this, yes, he does do this, and then in your third paragraph, that's when you develop more like more higher order thinking. You might present an alternative way of thinking. You might really go into what Euripides wants to display, but you do that later. You sort of lead into it, and that's something important to note. Anyway, we'll move on from that paragraph then. So with the conclusion, a thing that some teachers might push you to do is use critical readings. It's really optional, really doesn't matter. I thought Angry Young Man was pretty funny, so I used it a little bit. That's basically the only critical reading I knew, because this guy is a playwright, is a famous playwright. He wrote about tragedies, about in this play Troy getting absolutely destroyed, and then this critic calls him an angry young man. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I used it. It's not necessary. So this style of conclusion is a bit different to what I did for the exam. So I did this for the SAC, and I got 29 out of 30 for the SAC, like a similar style, not this exact essay. And so it's sort of concluding. So here I conclude the first paragraph, conclude the second paragraph, and then here is third paragraph E, and also talking about Euripides' overall contention. So what I did in the end of year exam, I'll just give you guys an idea now. End of year exam is that for the entire conclusion, I'll basically talk about the sort of author's contention and philosophical big idea. Philosophical big idea. And then I tried to leave them with something quite powerful at the end. And oftentimes I'd refer to the end of the play. Because the end of the play is often quite powerful. It's often the image that the playwright wants to leave you with. And so it's sort of like this. I'm trying to say that. So his whole purpose is to elicit a deep uneasiness from the audience in his effort to broaden the Hellenic, so Greek, ancient Greek, understanding of seemingly discrete concepts, an important lesson which still resonates with us today. That's like okay. It's kind of philosophical, kind of big idea. It's a bit too vague for my liking. Later in the year, I will share some exam style essays that I wrote. But yeah, the conclusion, I will generally focus entirely on the author's contention. Summarizing is a bit boring. Like anyone can summarize. It doesn't say much. You don't really need to hammer the same 3 paragraphs that you've done in the intro and you did in the paragraphs again onto the examiner. This is much more interesting, and I just really enjoyed writing it as well because it's really broadly thinking. It almost becomes philosophy rather than English. Alright, so thank you for listening through that. Just a couple of things. I'll just highlight the main points again. So I'll write them here. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Sure, alright. So, intro, philosophical. Alright. Intro, I like to start off with, describing a scene. And then I'd go into my 3 topic sentences. 3 topic sentences. With my BPs, I'd have 3 moments. Oh, whoops, 2 moments. And remember what I mean by moments. Like they're sort of just instances that have something in common. You can pick a specific moment. For example, in this play, when the kid was thrown off the battlements, or when the kid was torn away, Astyanax was torn away from his mother's breast and thrown off the battlements. That's one moment. You can just talk about that. That's quite powerful. Or you can talk about moments that have something in common. So like I was saying with Hecuba, there are many instances where she displays valor, and you can bunch those together as one moment as well. So 2 moments, and between them, you can have a you should have a linking sentence. Just acknowledging the difference between the 2 moments, and it also helps just to signpost that okay, you're moving from one to another. And you can also draw out the author's idea, purpose. You can draw out there, and then at the end of the paragraph, draw out again. Sure. And with conclusion, I would say depends on your style. I think if you're not that confident, it's much more worthwhile working on your BPs, working on your analysis, your themes, your intro. If you're quite confident in writing, you've done well, Then I suggest you can try out like very big idea, very philosophical, tackling big ideas. And these big ideas have been, developed throughout your entire essay, but you're sort of bringing them to fruition and to the focus of the reader's mind at the very end. So I think try a big idea, and of course see if your teacher likes it as well. It did well for me in the end of year exam, but school SACs are very different. So if you feel uncomfortable, then I think you can summarize it, but like summarize it in a more interesting and specific way. And then at the end just have like one sentence on author's purpose. Right, sure. And just finally, overall, clear language is so important. Don't fall in love with the big words and the sentences that you kind of know what they mean but not really. Like they seem cool but they're really not. I think the most admirable thing is being able to explain things in a really clear-cut way. I just think that's the best ability of them all, and so I encourage you guys to do that. Find language specific to your play or whatever you're studying. For example, for us, because it's an ancient Greek play, there are parts like Monados, Exodus, those parts we can use that language. It fits well. So use stuff your teacher uses, use a language that applies, and keep everything very clinical. At the start of the year, I wrote a really long essay that was just too convoluted. I thought it was cool, but my teacher brought me to my senses, and I really thank her for that. And my language really cleared up after then and served me well for the rest of the year as well. So yeah, thank you guys for joining today's video. I hope you found this style helpful. I'll be doing more sort of question styles. I think if I was in year 12, I would quite have appreciated being able to see like well-scoring essays or people doing questions. I think that's quite helpful. So I'd like to provide that to you guys. Leave any comments you have in the description, in the comments box below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Good luck for your SACs that are coming up, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next time.